This is Illuminate, the podcast about men with good hearts, open minds, and a desire to make the world better. Welcome to Illuminate. I'm your host, Chris Tidrick, and I'm here with Reverend Dr. Prince Robertson. Prince is the Dean of Students for Inclusion and Advocacy at Illinois Wesleyan University and a passionate voice for education, equity, and faith. He's also a proud husband and dad, a published author, and someone who's deeply committed to making a difference in his community. As a dean, minister, author, and advocate, he weaves faith, education, and family into everything he does, always leading with heart and purpose. Welcome to the show, Prince.
Good evening. Good evening.
Yeah, so I love to kind of dive right into it with our guests here on Illuminate and ask them about their why, their motivation. So where do you find purpose and what drives you?
Good evening again. I like to find purpose, honestly, in my family. I spoke with a group of students last night, a leadership group, and they asked me to talk to them about working hard and the payoff. And I wanted to use several different stories or themes to kind of bring it home for them. And where I landed was at my own personal testimony. And for the college students, I focused on when I was in undergrad, and then I focused on when I was in grad school. And it both boiled down to my children and my family and my wife. And so that's my main purpose for wanting more or doing more. It's the family. And then, of course, obviously, because I minister, whenever my head pastor needs me to fill in or to assist him as best as I can, my Christian faith, that's my purpose as well. I would also add that just being altruistic, being an individual that can help others and not wanting anything back in return. That's my purpose as well. So.
Yeah, those are all fantastic things to sort of be driven by and be motivated by. So let's dive into your journey and go back as far as you want. But I'd love to learn about where you came from and to where you are today, and any kind of lessons or kind of growth points that you had along the way.
Depends on how far back you want me to go.
You can go as far back as you'd like. If there's something really relevant from your childhood, let's dive in and talk about that.
Relevancy comes from where I was born and raised. And I can kind of split that down the middle, being born in Harlem, New York, raised in Harlem, New York, and then moving to Saginaw, Michigan at the age of 13, and then identifying that space as a home as well, through adolescence, a young man, and finding myself. So that's home for me, between Harlem, New York, and Saginaw, Michigan. And they just provide so many experiences, from the independent entrepreneurship, Renaissance kind of culture from New York City, within Harlem, and then more of the industrial life, especially for Black Americans, and the Great Migration from the 50s and 60s, and knowing that that's mostly what a lot of folks moved from the southern states, was to find that independence, and through the different plants and car plants and industrial, and that provided grit. So that essence of grit and grind in the Midwest, in addition to this independent, Renaissance culture with Harlem, I just kind of blend those two together. And I think that sets me apart from other people, because I've always got my hands in something, whether it's community theater, or volunteering as a basketball coach, or volunteering with some other mentoring program. taking care of business with the church, and just intertwining all of that with my family, even with work on campus and different evening events, and knowing that I can bring my family with me. That's my life. I'm always
Yeah.
always busy. I talk to my mom and different relatives back in New York, and they would ask when I'm coming back home to visit and things of that nature. And I literally have to pull up at least 4 to 5 calendars and schedules to figure out when I have time.
Yeah. So you still have a lot of family back in New York?
A lot of family, yeah.
Yeah. How is that cultural shift for you as a 13-year-old? I grew up on the East Coast outside
Yeah,
of New York in Connecticut,
yeah.
moved to the Midwest
What part of Connecticut?
in Stanford. So not too far,
Stanford. That's
not,
where I have a cousin that lives in Stanford
yeah. So
right now
not too
for a
far
few
away from where
years.
you grew up. And,
Yeah,
Stanford's certainly different.
35 minutes from the Bronx.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And I moved to the Midwest as a college student, and then stayed in the Midwest. I've been in Champaign-Urbana ever since college, and so it was a huge culture shock for me. So how was that for you?
It was a culture shock for me as well, because I came from a big city where it was always loud. There was always something to do. It's realistically the city that never sleeps, So
Yeah,
coming from that, and I'd say being a little bit sheltered, we stayed in public housing while in New York. So, I wasn't able to get out as much as I wanted to
yeah,
my friends and things of that nature, just because of the different crimes that we had in the 80s and the early 90s. So it was a little bit of it was a big cultural shift and a cultural change moving to the Midwest, where I had to learn how to cut grass, and I had
mm,
to shovel the snow. I had to, those kind of things. There were no skyscrapers. A lot of the residential homes were 2 stories or 1-story flats. Backyard. Where I grew up in Harlem, we didn't have all of that. You're just surrounded by a lot of brownstones and apartment buildings.
yeah,
So the culture was definitely real, and um, I can only go off of what I saw on television. And for me personally, that was, the different African American movies in the 90s, like Boys in the Hood and things of that nature.
hmm
Saw those 2-story, 1-story flats with grass and things of that nature, but the violence also came along with it. I was now a part of that kind of culture within Saginaw, Michigan as well, unfortunately. But it was
yeah,
really a cultural shift.
yeah. So what drove the move to Saginaw?
Well, that was all my mother. That was
Okay,
all my mom. It was no different than someone in a big city, and they wanted a slower pace of life, and it
yeah,
definitely was a slower pace of life. So that's what it was. I'd like to say I was in a good academic space. I may not have been the best academic student, but I was in a private school in New York City, the Boys Choir of Harlem
okay,
Academy, and then we, you know had to move to Michigan. The fortunate part about that is with the Boys Choir of Harlem, they actually came to Saginaw a couple times.
oh
I
really?
was able to reconnect with them.
Yeah,
So that was pretty cool.
that is pretty cool. So from Saginaw, where did you go? Like
Saginaw,
what's the rest of the journey?
yeah, yeah, yeah. I, I graduated from high school. I had my setbacks. I had my setbacks in high school. I just didn't do what I was supposed to do. I got into a lot of mischief, a lot of trouble. Um, and it came back to bite me because I wasn't able to graduate with my classmates,
Hmm.
the class of 99. Um, the different classes that I didn't pass, the many times that I was suspended from school and all of that kind of stuff, it came back to bite me. What I had to do, I had to go back to high school for an entire year in
Hmm.
addition to night school to finally graduate.
How did that impact you emotionally?
Well,
Like, what did that feel like to have to go through that?
I oftentimes reflect on where I was mentally at that time. One thing that I do remember is that I never really cared what other people thought about me in certain areas. Did it bother me that I didn't have the best clothes? Yeah. Did it bother me that I wasn't able to drive my own car or something like that, like any other, you know, peer would have in the 11th or the 12th grade or something like that. The minor things that, but in terms of people, looking at me or laughing at me because I had to come back, I heard it and I saw it, but it really didn't bother me.
Hmm.
It's still unexplainable. I still really don't know how to explain that, but I heard the laughs and things of that nature, but I did it to myself.
Yeah.
And although I was still, I went back to high school for an entire year, there was a purpose, there was a mission, and that was to graduate and to just be done with it. What I remember is a guidance counselor coming to my keyboarding class that, we had keyboarding classes in high school back then.
Yeah.
And she brought an application for community college, or Delta College. That was the one and only college application that I ever completed. Didn't know if I wanted to go. I just completed it because she asked me to.
Yeah.
I got accepted because it's a open door kind of, admission at Delta College or any other community college. But what provided a goal for me was basketball again.
Okay.
Played in high school, wasn't the best, didn't get any play time, different rec leagues as in any other city. And I walked on and tried out for this college basketball team with everything that I had gained in terms of potential and skill sets learned and all of that kind. I made the team. That's what actually kept me in college the first 2 to 3 years, was that I was playing a collegiate sport.
Yeah.
After not graduating on time.
Yeah, if you weren't as motivated as a student, that kind of keeps you engaged in the institution, right?
Between that year of going back to high school and getting selected to be on a college basketball team, whether it was Division I, Division III, NAIA, you name it, it's still a collegiate sport.
Yeah.
So between that year going back to high school and making the basketball team, I developed a chip on my shoulder. It's reminiscent of the last that documentary with Michael Jordan and the Bulls. And if you
the Last Dance,
the Last Dance,
yeah.
And so if you remember that documentary, he would legitimately create these scenarios and place it on his shoulder to motivate him. Yes. Now, I'm not saying that's what I did, but it's what happened.
Yeah.
Thereafter, I graduated and got an associate's degree, went on with life and got a bachelor's. And then I intentionally also started to keep a chip on my shoulder because it worked for me.
Yeah. What form did that chip take? Like, what were you intent on proving?
Well, then it went to what every oldest child in the household or any child in the household that's going to college first, wants to do, and that's to be the first person to graduate in the family.
How many siblings? How many siblings do you have?
I have a total of there's a total of 6 of us.
A big family.
That we grew up in the same household, and then in New York, I've got other siblings. I've got about 4 siblings there. One has passed away. So it created a chip on my shoulder to graduate.
Yeah.
The purpose that you asked me about earlier, that's a part of it. Was I the best college student again? Probably not. But I was in college. Did I make any immature decisions as a student and had to sit with the VP or the dean of students for something? Absolutely. And that's why I love what I do so much now, focusing on community standards. Any student that comes into my office that makes a mistake, it's okay for me to give them a second chance or a third chance or a fourth or a fifth, any kind of education to get them back on track because I've been there before.
You've lived it. Lived it. Yeah. You've sat in that seat that they're
absolutely.
sitting in.
From the most minor to being arrested. And then that VP, at that college said, you got to get your stuff together,
Yeah.
So I left I left Delta College and transferred to Grand Valley.
Okay.
I was just a regular student, not playing sports at this time. My girlfriend went with me, now wife. And so that was a different chapter. Because, now it's just student life in classes, no sports, as part of my student life. So it's just finding different organizations and trying to attempt to find an identity. And that was challenging within itself because now I had the freedom. I wasn't a commuter student anymore.
Yeah.
I was living on campus. I was finally on my own. And it was, textbook. Finding my own meals and dining hall and laundry and all of that kind of partying. And that's what eventually took me out because I eventually flunked out of Grand Valley. I just didn't do what I was supposed to do. In addition to that, my girlfriend at the time, who then became my fiance and wife, she got pregnant with our first child. So she went back home. And then I followed. And we enrolled into another 4-year institution and did our best to work it out. I remember starting that institution, Saginaw Valley State University, with certain stipulations that I had to have a C+ average, and I still wasn't able to make that because now I had moved from the boy to a young man with responsibility.
Yeah.
It was kind of hard to shake that because I still wanted to party. I still did party and hang out and things of that nature, but my responsibilities were different. So there was a struggle there. I ended up finally graduating in 2008 from Saginaw Valley. And at that point in time, I believe our son was maybe 3 or 4 years old. Okay. And we had to make ends meet, still in Saginaw, Michigan. So I'm working 3 jobs. She's working about 2 jobs. We're trying to make ends meet. And then I was blessed with an opportunity to interview with several universities and to receive my master's degree, have that paid for, tuition paid for, assistantships and things of that nature. I joined a leadership institute in Saginaw, Michigan. There was a group of us, and they placed us in front of these different corporations and businesses, from law firms to Dow Chemical, Dow Corning, the community college, the 4-year university, all of these places so we can each find our niche to move on and do better things in life. I went to Delta College, graduated from Delta College, went on, had a little bit of life, had a son, got engaged. When I went to that leadership training at Delta College, the vice president, he must have saw something.
Yeah.
And he said, I want you to apply for this position as a part-time intern. I second guessed it because I was like, what the hell am I going to do working at a college? Right?
Right. Yeah. You hadn't been a great student yourself. Why would you think that
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Lo and behold, I took the opportunity and I worked at that college part-time. That was one of the 3 jobs. I worked at that college part-time for 1.5 years, just gaining different skill sets in each department within the student services wing. And so a colleague of mine said, if you register for this placement exchange or job fair you can actually get your education paid for. I said, well, what would I be doing? He says, you're going to be working in residence life. You would think you would call it the dorms. I don't want to work in no dorms. I always say something. So I interviewed at Delta College for an actual professional position. There's one in, I believe, maybe student engagement, and another one maybe in admissions or something like that. Completely bombed both interviews. I'm talking about, like, why did you even offer this guy an on-campus in-person interview, right?
Yeah.
And then I called my colleague back and said, is that opportunity still available? I got some new tires. I drove out to Wisconsin, and that was the space where all of these universities and colleges came together once a year to just interview undergraduates and potential grad students. I interviewed with 7 schools. 3 of them offered me a campus interview, that being University of the Pacific in California, University of Oklahoma, and Southern Illinois University in Carbondale. We weighed our options. Now I'm married.
Yeah.
2 children. We weighed our options. California was just too far away from safety nets. We kind of second guessed University of Oklahoma. It's, tornadoes and hurricanes and all of that kind of stuff that goes on over there. On the campus of Southern Illinois University in Carbondale, there's an autism center that focuses on individuals and students that are on the spectrum. Our oldest son, was diagnosed on the spectrum. It was a perfect fit.
Yeah. It's opportune, right?
It was opportune time. We went to Carbondale. I studied for 2 years. That's when I actually became a student. That was my redemption. That was yet another chip placed on my shoulder. Like, I still remember them laughing at me in high school. I don't think they got the message that I have an associate's degree. I don't think they know that I have a bachelor degree. And then on another hand, I didn't know how to study. So I graduated with a bachelor's degree, but it was with a 2.0 GPA.
Yeah.
I remember a director at Saginaw Valley said, if I see a resume with a 2.0, I'm throwing it in the trash. I'll never forget that. So Carbondale was my redemption. And it was hard.
Was it just the chip on your shoulder, or was there something about that environment that sort of focused you in a way that other academic environments
had? Well, a lot of people that come from cities like Saginaw or Decatur or Danville, that's what we're looking at. So people that come from those spaces, they don't want to go back home. We didn't want to go back home. We were finally safe. We were free.
Yeah.
Right? My first semester was the toughest in grad school because I didn't know how to study. There was a lot of trial and error. Maybe I'll go try and study in the library. That doesn't work. Maybe I'll study in my office. That doesn't work. Maybe I'll study in the afternoon. That didn't work. Maybe I'll study in the evening. That I had to do all of this trial and error. I had to dose up on Mountain Dew and 5-hour energy drinks because I had a family.
Yeah.
What worked for me was a breakdown. My first semester, I received 2 A's and an incomplete. I just couldn't pass one of those classes. There was just so much material. And I called a friend of mine, and these were books that we had to read every week of 100 pages or more. She said, what book are you reading right now? How many pages? I said, it's like 175 pages. I got to have this read by next week. I think I'm just going to be done. I'm going to drop out and just find some kind of plant or something like that in Carbondale. At least I'm not going back to Saginaw.
Yeah.
And she said, just break it down. Every day, just read 25 to 35 pages. Here's something I'm going to send you on highlight, and just highlight, 10% of what you need, that kind of stuff. And it was that conversation, that shift of not wanting to go back home and eventually it worked out for me.
So it's almost as if you like hadn't had somebody in your life to teach you how to learn.
No.
And just that little bit of a
Right.
hint, a push that from her
Yeah.
really helped you
Yeah.
out and helped you focus there. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Sometimes
Absolutely.
it's those little things. So let's shift a little bit and kind of get into some of the other questions that I normally do with guests here. And one of the themes that I bring up over and over again with all of my guests is this idea of growth, like personal growth. And the one thing that has like really made sense to me, and as I've talked to, I think you're guest number 15, as I've talked to all of these men, this idea that so much of what we grow up with and what we learn as younger people, at some point that becomes not useful in life, and we have to deconstruct something that we held as foundational earlier in our lives and just say that doesn't serve me anymore. What was that thing for you? Like what did you have to throw away from kind of your younger years, kind of a belief that maybe you held really closely that no longer served you?
I had to throw away almost everything that I would deem as bad. And when I say that, I think about my children. At this point, just the boys, not necessarily my daughter, but for my boys, I had to throw away different habits that I had learned and to not inject that into them. Let's talk about the smallest thing, maybe socializing while in school for my boys. When I grew up, it was just a thing that you as a boy, while you're in school, how many girlfriends do you have? Or did you get her phone number? Or, when did you lose your virginity? Are you still a virgin? That kind of,
Yeah.
stuff. And I had to let go of that. One, because I didn't have a steady father in my life for a period of time. My biological father just left. One stepfather came in and it was different. I gotta watch what I say. It was different.
Yeah.
But then maybe around the age of 14 or 15, the man who my mother is still married to came around. And it was a blessing to have him. But during that time, on up until now, what I had done was I've identified a positive man that I had an interaction with, whether it's a coach, someone from the community center, someone at church, and I'll do my best to an administrator in college, and I'll pull something positive from each of them to create who I am now. And knowing that we're all imperfect, I saw imperfect within them as well. I just left some of those, I left it there because I already had imperfections and habits that I had built up. So now that, that I'm a father and a husband, when raising my sons, I believe Jeremiah, our oldest, was maybe in the 6th or 7th grade. And of course, that's around the time where us boys start to, want to talk to girls and things of that nature. And I was pretty stern with him. He was the trial and error, but I was pretty stern with him on saying, focus on your academics and your wrestling. The other stuff is going to come when it's time to come.
Yeah.
My sons aren't in a space where when they come home, I'm pressuring them and saying, you got a girlfriend, but you get a phone number. It's not supposed to be like that.
Right.
In my opinion. So when you talk about, the the bad habits and things to let go and keep it. Those are the things that I try to let go of because I want to raise them to be a different kind of man than I am right now. And I believe that worked. I'm just using that as an example.
Yeah, yeah.
I believe it works, because, now he's in college, he's thriving, he's passing his classes, he's wrestling, and he's developing his social life. So now I have a 14-year-old, and it's the same thing. I just say it differently with him, a little bit softer. Son, I know that you want to be social and things of that nature, and that's absolutely fine. But I also want you to understand that your number one priority are your grades and then your sports of your choice, because it keeps you busy, it keeps you involved, it keeps you motivated and things of that nature. And so I'm hoping that the same thing, the same habit, continues to grow. Because one thing, I talk to students every single day. And for me as a man, I think it's okay for me to say this. It's okay. And as a Christian, I think it's okay for our sons and daughters to be virgins until they get married. Now, I do understand that we're in the real world and real life things happen.
Absolutely.
So now I would say, I think it's okay to graduate high school as a virgin. Again, I'm just digging in a little bit more of, what I'm trying to do with my family and things of that nature. So I'm basically saying we don't have to latch on to the society's norms of what people think we're supposed to do, or people think that you're supposed to do in high school.
Right.
You actually can graduate high school and not smoke weed. No matter if it's legalized or not. It's not legalized for a 16 or 17-year-old. You can actually graduate high school without drinking or getting drunk. All of those kind of things. Unfortunately, what I had to go through in high school was a little bit different.
Yeah, and it's okay to set standards for ourselves.
It's okay to set standards.
Yeah, that maybe
or striving for some form of excellence or success.
Yeah, absolutely. So you mentioned that the example of your sons. Like, what are the personal development things that you're currently working on?
Learning how to say no.
Tell me more about that. Tell me more.
That's why I'm so overly involved. Let's talk about theater, for example. When I started doing theater, maybe in the Champaign area in 2016, and it takes a lot of time away from you. It takes a lot of time away from your family. I've figured out a process on intersecting both.
What's that?
So when I did theater, I bring my kids with me. And after some time, my youngest son wanted to do theater, and he did a couple of productions. So I was able to spend time with them and fulfill myself and use it as a stress reliever. Community service, the same thing. If I'm, with my fraternity or any other organization within Champaign-Urbana, it's going to be a Saturday morning when I probably won't be back until 1 or 2 o'clock in the afternoon. I could have used that time to have breakfast with the kids and things of that nature, my wife. And I've gone back to my process of intersecting. So I bring them with me. I'm spending time with the children and I'm spending time with my wife. We're giving back to the community. We're teaching lessons to them, and everything's clicking on the same cylinder, even now, as I coach my son's basketball team, my wife's the assistant coach.
Yeah.
My daughter's come to practice for the past 2 years. Now she's playing basketball.
So I'm gonna press you a little bit. What are you saying no to?
It's not saying no to the opportunity to volunteer, get back into the community, because I have such a big heart in just giving back to other people and giving back to the to the community, because it's what raised me.
Yeah.
coming from New York to Saginaw, Michigan, the cultures are totally different. But one thing that small communities like Saginaw and Champaign and Decatur and all of those kind of likened communities have, they've got community centers. And it was that one, those one or two community centers that I can always go back to or go to and be involved in some capacity. And what I saw there were men that looked like me giving back, women who look like me giving back. So naturally, I always feel as though something's missing if I'm not in that kind of space to give back as well.
So that's actually a great segue into what I wanted to talk about next. And it's this idea of community. And so where or what or who do you rely on for support?
I rely on my church, my pastor, and the members of that church, a small church in Urbana, Berean Covenant Church. I rely on them. If I need someone to have a real conversation with, to be vulnerable, I can connect with someone in that space. Go to Espresso Royale, coffee shop, sit down, have some tea or something like that, and communicate. I can also rely on different, random people within the community connected to different fraternities or different sororities within the community. Just genuine friendships that's been made. Champaign is now the home. It's the new Saginaw. It's the new Harlem for us. It's our home now. Yeah. If I'm running late, getting back from Bloomington, I can make a phone call to our neighbor down the street and say, hey, can Danielle come over for about 30 minutes until I get there? Yeah. Or something of that nature.
So I want to dive a little bit into that. You mentioned that this community allows you to be vulnerable. Like, what does that mean for you? This is a topic that I think a ton of men struggle with, and like they don't know how to be vulnerable. So what does that look like for you?
It's two things here. For me, with the community and being vulnerable, it's placed me in a space where I don't want to start over again. I don't want to move. I'm on a great trajectory, a great path within my field of one day being an assistant vice president or a vice president. And if I continue to work hard after another 15 years or so, maybe a president. So, but I may also have to move.
Right. Yeah.
Another state, Yeah. So it's kind of scary for me when it comes to vulnerability in a community because we're so comfortable. I don't want to start over. I don't want to go anywhere. But outside of the community vulnerability and just simply being vulnerable, that's really not hard for me either because of the ministry that I do, that I'm part of. I minister to people at different times, not just inside of the church, outside the church as well, through text messages, through phone calls and things of that nature. So 2025 is different from 2015. In 2015, I really didn't too much care about natural, genuine connection. Yeah. But 10 years later, I know that the natural and genuine connection is not just going to benefit me, it's going to benefit other people as well. It's not hard for me to be vulnerable because it gives a snapshot of who I am. And it also helps me to read that person and to discern things at the same time.
How do you, when you're in a ministerial relationship with somebody, you are kind of by default the leader in that conversation. And sometimes it's hard to be vulnerable as the leader because you want to be seen as strong and solid and
at different times.
Yeah. So how does that work for you?
At different times, because when you think about that, it's about accountability. So if I'm in that space of ministering to someone, I also have to know that I'm going to be ministered to as well.
Mm.
And
The connection is two-way.
It's two-way. Just like within my chosen faith walk and spirituality, it's two-way.
Yeah.
So if I'm ministering to someone, whether it's through text or a phone call on the way home or a student in my office, because I do pray and read scripture with my students, I'm just blessed to be in that type of institution here.
Yeah.
They may learn something from me, but I'm also going to learn something from them as well.
Yeah.
With being vulnerable. And with that, like I said, it's accountability, because now I know I have someone else that can hold me accountable whenever I get weak.
Mm-hmm.
Then I can call them. Again, it doesn't matter if it's someone from high school or even a student. There's been students that came right here into my office, and we would talk about, we would establish rapport and talk about our day and think of that nature. And we're digging into some scripture or we'll pray together. They've given me scripture that I've used in the pulpit.
Yeah.
That's the communication.
Yeah.
So it's accountability that comes from being vulnerable.
So what role does male friendship play in your life?
I'm selective with it more now.
Tell me why. Tell me why.
Think about a teenager that would come home and they would say, "Oh yeah, I was just at the park with my friend," or I've got to call my friend to get the homework from class, or anything that has the word friend. And I would often talk to my children and say, are they your friends? Or are they your peers? They're just your classmates.
Yeah, there's a big difference.
I'm really
there.
selective now on what friends mean.
Okay.
I can honestly count on one hand males that I can contact and be vulnerable with on a different level.
So what about them, makes them pass the cut? Like they get through that door. What is it about it?
Because they're just as human as I am. They're just as imperfect as I am. And when you find someone who's just as human and just as imperfect as you are, it's like Planet Fitness. It's a no judgment zone.
Yes.
So I can be myself, and I can let them know, man, here's what I did. I wasn't supposed to do it, but I don't know what I was thinking. And they're not going to condemn me. They're going to pull me up, or they're going to comfort me, or they're going to give me sound advice.
Yeah. Is there an accountability piece in that as well?
Accountability as well.
Yeah.
Because now when they're feeling some kind of way, I can do the same thing.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for sharing that. Male friendship has been it's kind of a curiosity for me, because until maybe the last 10 years of my life, I haven't had really close male friends. We actually made a connection through one of my closer male friends, James Quisenberry.
Yeah.
And it's been, it's taken me, 5 decades to get to this point where I can sort of have those close male friends. Almost all of my life, my closest friends were women. And it's been a real revelation for me. Like, there's a real value in it. And so I'm always really curious to talk to other men about what male friendship means to them. So let's switch into our lightning round. I've got 11 questions, real quick answers. I might dive into a couple of them if there's something I want to learn more about. First question: what are your top 3 values?
I value my spirituality. I value my family, and I value giving back. I value my volunteerism.
So, who is one role model you've had in your life?
Ooh, wow. You know what? I'm going to go with it's not a bailout, but I'm gonna a true role model that will always. I'm thinking of someone who will always be there for you. Um, it's got to be my mother.
Mm.
It-
Tell me about that. Like, what about her that, just is that
well,
rock for you?
I think she has embodied um, the true definition of overcoming and resilience.
Hmm.
It's not easy moving 4 kids to another state, 12 to 14 hours away and starting over.
Yeah.
It's not easy, when to manage 4 personalities. It's not easy once you send them to school. If the car is broken down, you walk to work and then you walk back home.
Yeah.
It's not easy. It wasn't easy being a single parent mother. That's a soft spot within my heart, when it comes to mentoring and focusing on young
Yeah.
men and boys and girls that come from single parent homes.
I want to say that is not a cop out in any way, shape, or form. That's like a really wonderful, heartfelt answer. I had this realization, and I had this realization like way too late in my life, but it was just this past fall. There, I won't get into sort of the reasons why it struck me this way, but it just like everything crashed down on me, and I said, Black women are the most resilient humans on the face of this
Yeah,
earth,
yeah,
right? And it was like, oh my, and
yeah,
so I think your mother's a testament to that, right? Kind of a
yeah,
living, breathing example of that.
for sure.
Yeah.
Appreciate it. Yeah, yeah.
So who do you hope you're a role model for?
First and foremost, my children. I hope that I'm setting a specific standard um, bar for them, but not a standard and bar that they, can never feel as though they can overcome. Because
Mm.
I want them to be better than me. I need them to be better than me. And so it's definitely my children. And then it's just, slipping into the shoes of those who were before me and as that like mentor or a community mentor that maybe a college student or one of my children's friend can strive to be like.
Yeah. What's one way you make the world a better place for others?
I think I make the world a better place by being authentic, and that had to come with a lot of trial and error. And when I say being authentic, I mean not necessarily ascribing to, I know this sounds kind of commercial or cliche, but not necessarily ascribing to what society deems as right or the way it's supposed to be.
Mm.
You know, um, again, I know it sounds a little bit cliche and things of that nature, but to be that individual, to let someone know that you can be yourself. If you like anime, then you just like anime.
Yeah.
If if you like theater, then that's great. Love theater.
Yeah.
If you like baseball instead of basketball at the height of 6'10", then just love baseball instead of basketball at the height of 6. Don't try to
Yeah.
minimize yourself to fit in somewhere where you're really not supposed to be.
Yeah. So what's the hardest thing about being you in today's world?
Well, that might sound cliche as well, but the hardest thing for me is just being a black man,
Mm.
in my opinion. The notion is always there, or the reality is always there that a black man will always have to, work twice as hard to be understood or to receive some kind of benefits or reward. That's always going to be there. I can't change anything.
Yeah.
Um,
What
but
does that look like for you in academia? I'm curious about that.
Well, academia is a totally different world.
Yeah, but it's not immune from
I
that,
tell a
right?
lot of people that a college university, more so a PW, a predominantly white university, is a mirror of America.
Hmm.
Let me clarify that. A
Yeah,
predominantly white institution in America is a mirror of America itself.
yeah,
Whether you're looking at the demographics, whether you're looking at the lack of equity and opportunity, the struggle to create equity, um, it's a mirror of where we are.
yeah,
So, it's hard to navigate that because I'm always going to run into some kind of implicit bias or racism, even with a doctoral degree. Um, and it's taken me some time to navigate around that. And I don't know if I ever get it right, but there's definitely some challenges that come along with comes along with my success in addition to just the way that I look.
yeah,
But that's a deeper conversation because whether you're, Black or African American or Latinx, you're always going to run into some kind of struggle, even within your own community.
mm,
White women, especially Black women, you're always going to run into some kind of something within your own, even within your own community. So I know that there's always going to be a fight. And that's why I do my best to tell my students and my children and to just be authentic, just be yourself. This place may not be for you. This space may not be for you, but guess what? There is somewhere that is for you.
yes,
If you want to make this space for you, one thing that my supervisor would always say, she would say, learn the culture and build community.
mm,
So that's what I've genuinely stole that phrase from my supervisor.
yeah,
And she knows this. I've gone to a conference last month and I've used that phrase, build relationships and learn a community. Whether I'm accepted or not
yeah.
within a specific space, I can still find some relationship with someone and to learn the culture.
And it's through that relationship that you can then influence the culture to change.
Yep.
Right. But if you don't have that, if you don't learn the culture, if you don't build those relationships, you can't possibly change the
Can't.
culture.
You
Yeah.
can't. You're
Yeah.
going to be closed out. You're closing
Yeah.
yourself off.
Yeah.
You're not providing
Yeah.
any type of anything for growth.
Yeah.
I had to learn that the hard way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what's your favorite emotion?
My favorite emotion, that's a good one. I've never heard that one before. That's a good one. I don't know that I have an answer to that one. My favorite emotion?
Yeah. Your favorite emotion. Like whatever you feel, like
I don't know if this is an
what's your
emotion.
favorite feeling? Yeah.
Being reminiscent.
That's an emotion.
Not
Absolutely.
necessarily reminiscing on just the good stuff, but just being reminiscent.
It's like nostalgia, right? That's
Nostalgic.
yeah.
Yeah.
That's actually my son's favorite emotion is nostalgia.
Yeah, there we go. Yeah,
He
they did
loves
make that
reflecting on the
emotion, didn't they,
past.
in the movie?
Yeah. Excellent.
It's being nostalgic. My wife knows that I will put on a specific radio station and just sit back and just think
Yeah.
about what was and
Yeah.
why it was, and yeah,
Yeah.
that's a good one.
Yeah.
I'm gonna use that one.
My son has this theory of the afterlife possibly being the ability to like scrub rewind your entire life and see any of the individual pieces of your life.
I like that. I'm
Um,
going to use that with my students.
yeah. Yeah. So what's your least favorite emotion?
My least favorite emotion is now you got me thinking about the movie, um, but it's envy.
Hmm. Why?
Um, I think it breeds complications, and I
Mm,
think it breeds, you know, um, misery. I think it breeds confusion.
yeah.
I don't know how you can break someone from that emotion of being envious or envy. But also, you know, I was just talking to someone a couple of weeks ago. I think you can have a healthy level of envy. Like Michael Jordan, he creates those chips on his shoulders.
Yeah.
To a healthy
It's
level
like,
of envy.
I want what you have, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So what brings you the most joy in life?
Oh yeah, my family brings me the most joy. Because it's anytime I have my son home from college and everyone is under the same roof, that's joy. It's some of the most peaceful nights of sleep. It's, God in the midst of my entire family being together. That's joy for me.
Yeah. Awesome. What makes you most proud of yourself?
What makes me most proud of myself is my resilience and determination to change and to continue to change. So the bow tie hasn't always been there.
Yeah.
The attitude that comes with this bow tie hasn't always been there. And if I would have latched on to that other attitude and kept that kind of, those kind of behaviors going, I wouldn't be sitting here with you right now. So it's the determination to continuously want to change and to continuously want more.
Fantastic answer. As an aside, I have to say, like, I admire a guy who can pull off a bow tie and like pull it off well. Because I can't. Like, I'm just not a bow tie guy. But whenever I see a guy, I'm like, wow, that guy looks sharp in a bow tie.
But
So,
after some time, within the past 5 to 7 years, I can honestly tell you that it's a uniform now. No different than someone that works at Dow Corning or Rivian or one of the big threes or what have you, and they have to wear a uniform. A police officer, a doc, they wear a uniform. This isn't a uniform.
yeah.
It's just the way that my mind is rigged now.
Yeah.
I work as a dean of students or a director or an assistant director in higher ed, or even when I was a hall director, this was what I wore. This was my uniform because those who came before me, who were presidents and VPs and deans, this is what I saw them wear. Those who I saw in the pulpit, this is what I saw them wear. So
dress what you want to be.
But here's the thing. Now watch this. The church that we're now a part of, I don't wear this to church. I wear Jordans sometimes, some jeans, a button-up shirt, maybe a hoodie sometimes.
Yeah.
Because I don't need to be anything else at church. I don't have to wear a uniform at church. I just don't know if people in biblical times wore suits. You
can take off the costume.
I take off the costume. So this is really a uniform or a costume.
Yeah.
It's a different part of me now.
Yeah.
I enjoy it. Don't get it wrong. I enjoy wearing bow ties and suits and things of that nature. But when I leave out of these doors, I want to be a different level of authentic.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm still authentic now.
Yeah.
I just want to be a different level of authentic when I leave out of these doors.
Yeah. Where can you feel the most yourself?
I feel myself when I'm at home, when I'm in my lawn, when I'm in my garden, when I'm watching the Knicks play, when I'm being goofy with my kids, helping them to understand that it's okay to be goofy. It's okay to be goofy and smart. I can be myself when I'm with my family. I can just yell anything I want to yell in the house to get a laugh with them and let loose and things of that nature. Myself with the kids that I mentor, so that's where I'm in my element.
Excellent. One final question. What's the one thing that you hope people take away from this conversation?
I hope that people can take away what I talked to those students about last night. And their theme was working hard and the payoff that comes from it. I want people to understand the same thing that I stress and preach to teenagers and college students, that you're gonna run into bumps in the road. I ran into several, and most of my downfalls were self-inflicted. I get it. I understand. But there were other times where things just happened, and they happened because I was supposed to go through it. So I would hope that people would take from this conversation that there was a young man who made mistakes in high school due to a lack of whatever, and he didn't graduate on time. And then he went to college and got arrested 3 times, but yet still doesn't have a misdemeanor or a felony. But he had to go through all of that. There was a young man who had a child out of wedlock. There was a young man who didn't know how to be a man. There was a young man who didn't know how important academics were, whether it's to get a degree or a trade or military or a police force or whatever. I would hope that people would take away the importance of giving back to the community and not wanting a paycheck for it. I would hope that people would take away from this the importance of just pouring out and pouring out and pouring out, and knowing and believing that you'll be refilled so you can pour out some more. This conversation can honestly be a colloquium that can go as long as 6 hours just by me telling you about my downfalls. But I think that it's the success thereof surpasses the downfalls. Because it's like everything we go through in life, we go through it for a specific reason.
Suffering is a wonderful teacher. It really is.
Yeah.
So thank you so much for the conversation today, Prince. It's been great getting to know you and learning your story and the lessons that you've learned. I always end all of these conversations with an encouragement. Keep up the hard work.
Yeah, I appreciate you. Thank you for the opportunity. It's always good to reflect. Always good to reflect.
You can learn more about Illuminate at illuminate.substack.com. We are also streaming on Apple, Spotify, Amazon, and YouTube. Thanks for listening and watching, and we'll see you at the next episode of Illuminate.